Students, welcome to my YouTube channel, and today the topic which we are going to start the chapter is the exogenous process and associated landforms. It's a very simple chapter and I hope you will understand it very easily. Okay, so without much delay, let's start the video. So exogenous process and the associated landforms. Whenever we say the term exogenous, the first thing which comes to our mind is the forces which acts on the surface of the earth, isn't it? Outside the earth's surface also we can say, not from inside we say endogenous processes, isn't it? Now the agents of nature like river, glacier, wind, sea waves, and underground water, these are the agents of the exogenous process which constantly work, okay, continuously work on the earth's surface in order to label the earth's surface. Okay, the unevenness of the earth's surface will be converted into a flat surface or the flat plane, so that labeling of the earth's surface by the exogenous process is known as gradation. Okay, means that the process of leveling of the earth's surface is known as gradation. Now gradation is again further classified into two different types of processes, that is degradation and aggradation. Okay, now degradation means wearing down of the land surface, means breaking down the highland area into, or the breaking down the rocks into smaller pieces is known as the degradation. And aggradation means increase of the low-lying areas by the process of deposition. Now let us understand that with the help of a simple diagram over here. Now for example, let us take rivers. Now for highland, if it is there, now the rivers will continuously act on that highland and it will weather away the materials or disintegrate the materials into smaller pieces, isn't it? And that materials will be taken away into some far flung areas and will be deposited in a depression, in a low lying area. Okay, now here the process of degradation is taking place, and over the years the materials will be taken down and the height of this place will be reduced. Okay, but the rivers will continuously erode away the materials from that place and it will take away and deposit it into some low lying areas. So layer after layers the deposition will take place. As a result, what is happening here, there is a reduction of height is taking place, we call it as degradation. In this place there is increase in the height of the low lying areas, so we call it as aggradation. And eventually a time will come where the highland area will be, okay, subjected to the high level of erosion and it will reduced into a flat level land, as well as the low lying areas due to the deposition of the materials, it will also come to the label of the land. So this process of labeling with the help of degradation and aggradation process, we call it as gradation. Okay, it's very simple, isn't it? Now again the thing is that over here, if you see, the degradation mainly involves two different types of process, that is the weathering and erosion. Weathering means breaking down of the rock, disintegration of rocks into smaller pieces, and erosion means that broken down rock fragments or the disintegrated rock fragments which are there will be transported away, okay, transported away, or removed from the place of its origin and take away to the far flung areas. That process is known as erosion. And when weathering and erosion takes place simultaneously at the same time, when it takes place, we call it as denudation. Okay, now sometimes degradation we use, synonymously we also use denudation also. Okay, so it almost refers the same thing. Okay, now we will move into the another topic and we will study the topic in detail, that is weathering. So weathering we already have discussed, means the definition, that is the breaking down of rocks into smaller pieces, we call it as weathering. Weathering, again there are different types, that is physical weathering, chemical weathering, and biological weathering. So as the name already suggests over here, physical weathering means in which, over here listen carefully, the disintegration of the rocks will takes place. Okay, the rocks will disintegrate into smaller fragments, into smaller pieces, but the chemical composition of the rocks will remain the same. Only the rock will disintegrate into much more smaller pieces into different shape and size. Okay, but the chemical composition of the rocks will remain the same. It will not alter. Okay, that is also called physical weathering or mechanical weathering also. So it is also of different types like block disintegration, granular disintegration, explosion, and frost action. And all these kinds of disintegration, mainly it takes place because of the two factor, that is the temperature and the pressure. Okay, temperature and the pressure leads to the physical, or the the change in the temperature basically leads to the physical disintegration or the physical weathering. Now we will see this weathering also individually. Now, in the physical weathering, students, if you see block, granular, and explosion, these are the process which is much more prevalent, okay, over in the desertic areas, okay, where the range of temperature is very high, and the frost action, which is there, like it is much more seen in the areas, in the high altitudinal areas, okay. So let us see how does this processes work. So the block, granular, and explosion, as I said, it all takes place or much more prevalent in the desertic area because the range of temperature is very high in the desert areas. Okay, during the daytime the temperature, as I said, it takes place in the desertic area, in the desert area, because the range of temperature is high in the desert areas. Okay, so as I was saying, like the in the desert area the range of temperature is very high. That means the during the daytime the temperature reaches up to 50 degrees Celsius, and at the night time the temperature will reach up to 7-8 degrees Celsius. Okay, so the range of temperature, the difference of highest and the lowest temperature is extremely high in the desert area. So in that conditions, what happened is during the daytime when the temperature is very high, the rocks will expand. Okay, and at the night time when the temperature will drop, during that time the rocks will contract. Okay, so this process continues for a long period of time, the expansion and the contraction, expansion and the contraction, okay, ultimately leads to the degradation of the rocks. So when the rock disintegrate into different shapes, or like in the form of different blocks, then we call it as block disintegration. Means the process is same due to the expansion and contraction. Okay, but when it disintegrate in the shape of a blocks, then we call it as block disintegration. And when the disintegration takes place in very irregular sizes and shape, we call it as granular disintegration. And explosion is like peeling of an onion, okay, layer by layers. Okay, so this kind of the disintegration, when it takes place in the rock, means the outer layer will be much more subjected to the expansion and contraction, but the inner layer of the rocks will remain untouched. Okay, so what happens is only the outer layer will peeled off, but the inner layer will remain unbroken, and the inner layer again now it will be to the must exposure. Okay, so that layer will be again will get peeled off. So layer after layer, when like an onion, when the rocks get disintegrates, we call it as explosion process. Okay, now frost action is a little different here. Why it is different is it is also called freeze thaw action, and it is highly subjected, as I said, in the high altitudinal places, in the high altitude where the temperature is quite low. Okay, so in this process, what happens generally is when the water, okay, when the water which is present in the cracks and all, okay, during at the high altitudinal time, at the night time the temperature will drop. So when the temperature drops below the freezing point, this water which is present in the crack will turn into the solid ice. Okay, so when it turns into the solid ice, the volume of the water will increase, and as a result what happens, it will start pressurizing the side. it will give more lateral pressure. Okay, so when it converts into the solid ice, it will start pressurizing on the either side, and eventually what happens, the cracks will get widened up. So this process will continues again. During the night time it will freeze to ice, and at the the daytime it will again melt, and at night again it will freeze, the volume will increase, and there will be the constant pressure on both the side. So eventually one day what will happen, the cracks will get widened up. Okay, and the rocks will split into different half. Okay, or it will disintegrate into smaller pieces. So that it's called frost action, or it is also called, as I said, freeze thaw action. Okay, so this was your physical weathering. Now we have is the chemical weathering, and in chemical weathering mainly the disintegration of the rocks takes place because of the alteration in the chemical composition of the rocks. Okay, when the chemical composition of the rocks changes, then those weathering takes place. So it is also further classified into different types: oxidation, carbonation, hydration, and solution. Oxidation, so as the name suggests over here, oxygen plays a vital role, and it is a much more found in the rocks which contains high amount of iron. Okay, so when the iron and oxygen comes in contact, or the rainwater also we can say, so when it comes in contact with the iron, okay, ferric oxides are created or formed. So ferric oxide means the rusting, isn't it, rusting of the rocks. So the rocks will become weaker, and eventually it will disintegrate into smaller pieces. Okay, and carbonation, again it is much more seen in the rocks where the carbonate is present in more an amount, for example lime. Okay, so this carbonate, when it comes in contact with the rainwater again, okay, the carbonic acid, it will turn into calcium bicarbonate, and in terms which is very weak and easily soluble in water, so it will get disintegrate into smaller pieces. Next we have is the hydration. Again, some of the minerals, okay, some of the minerals, when they dissolve, the hydrogen which is present in the water. Okay, so that is called hydration. So the thing is that sometimes the hydrogen, when it comes in contact with some of the minerals, it will increase in volume. Okay, and it becomes heavy because of the more amount of water is absorbed, that means the hydrogen is absorbed. Okay, so the volume of that minerals will increase, and it start pressurizing the outer surface of the rock, and eventually again the rocks will disintegrate into smaller pieces. Okay, for example like feldspar, when it absorb more amount of hydrogen, it will convert into kaolin. Okay, and ultimately it will disintegrate the rock into smaller pieces. Next we have is the solution. Now the rainwater, okay, the has will dissolve some of the or the certain minerals, isn't, for example like rock salt and gypsum. So those kinds of minerals are highly soluble in water, so they quickly get dissolved and will be removed by the rainwater from the rocks. So rocks again eventually will disintegrate into smaller pieces when those minerals are removed from its from rock, isn't it? So these are the different types of chemical weathering. So here as you can see, the what happens is the chemical composition of the rocks are changing into something else, so that's the reason it is getting weakened and ultimately breaks into smaller pieces. So that is your chemical weathering. Now we have is the biological weathering. Now biological weathering is mainly because of the action of animals, insects, and vegetation. Okay, so like animals and insects and human beings also we can say, so we disintegrate the rocks into smaller pieces in the process of construction, isn't it? Now animals, boring animals, which mice or rabbits and all, which they lives in the cracks. Okay, so due to the constant boring of those cracks, okay, dwelling of those cracks will widen the crack much more, and ultimately it will break into smaller pieces. Okay, and the vegetation also plays a very important role, like the sometimes if you have noticed, sometimes the trees are grown on the cracks of the rocks. Okay, now the thing is that the roots which is present in the cracks will eventually start growing bigger, and the cracks of that rocks will get widened up, and one day it will be so widened enough that the rocks will split into different pieces, isn't it? So the roots of the vegetation also plays a important role in the disintegration of rocks, so that whenever it is because of the action of animals, vegetation, human beings, okay, the rocks disintegrate into smaller pieces, we call it as biological weathering. Okay, so this was the different types of exogenous processes, and various processes which are involved in the formation of different landforms. Okay, and in the further chapters we will be discussing about the landforms which are created because of the action of river, glacier, wind, underground water, etc. Okay, so this much for today, students. Thank you for watching, and in case of any doubts are there, you can leave it in the comment section. I will be very happy to help you. Thank you.